Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 6th of June, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So over the weekend, I put out a tweet where I said, I don't think people realize just how incredibly bad crypto's image is to the quote-unquote outside world. They all think that we're destroying the planet, that every single crypto, including ETH and BTC, is a scam, that no value is being generated, and that it should all be completely banned. And then I continued the thread with a few examples, and then I ended the thread by saying that I was going to give kind of like my 10-minute pitch that I give in real life to people, whenever they kind of like come at me with, crypto's a scam or the government's going to ban it or any of those kind of like bad narratives. So I want to do that today for you guys. Now, I'll tell you when I'm starting the actual pitch because there's a few ground rules that I think I need to run through first. So this is kind of like how I approach it. Let's run through a scenario here. So I might be at kind of like a family gathering. I might be with kind of like friends, and someone brings up obviously the topic of what I do for a living, right? And then I say, okay, well, I'm involved in the cryptocurrency industry. I focus most of my time on something called Ethereum. And I mean, half the time they've heard of it, half the time they haven't. They've all heard of Bitcoin, unfortunately or fortunately. I'll explain why I say unfortunately there. But yeah, they've all heard of Bitcoin. So I don't really have to kind of like explain exactly, what crypto is. It's not like they haven't heard of crypto before. They know crypto, they know Bitcoin, and funny enough, a lot of them know about NFTs as well. So that's kind of like how it usually starts. And then from then on, I try to, if they are pushing the issue, if they're kind of like really saying things like, they think it's a scam or the government's going to shut it down, like sometimes I'll get asked, like, aren't you, scared for your future that kind of like your livelihood's going to get shut down? And I'm like, okay, let me run this through with you. And I kind of say to them, like let me just give you kind of like the rundown of how I see things. Now, I don't pitch them like a sales pitch, and that's actually very important. Like, I'm not trying to sell them anything. It's actually very important for you to basically make sure that you're not acting like you're trying to sell them anything, because I think that's what it turns a lot of people off, where a lot of people get shilled these coins or the NFTs or anything or investments, and it kind of feels like a multi-level marketing scheme where people are like, you're just telling me to buy it because you have it and you want the kind of like price to go up and all these sorts of stuff. So I don't actually ever talk about the prices, what to buy. I don't kind of like give any investment advice, and I don't make my pitch sound like I'm trying to get them to buy something, right? So I go into it with the goal of killing those surface level narratives. First and foremost, I want to kill the narrative of crypto is a scam or only used by criminals, or is or the government's going to ban it, or anything else that they've kind of like got from the mainstream media. But I do kind of like preface it by saying, there are a lot of scams in the industry. Just like any industry, there are scammers, there's opportunists, and they kind of like get that, right? I think everyone gets that. There's scammers and opportunists in every single industry, and at some point of our lives, we're going to get kind of like either scammed or taken advantage of in some way by an institution, whether it be like a company or kind of like some influencer or whatever it is, right? It's just unavoidable in this day and age, I think, for most people. And then I explain to them that the only reason why they have these views of crypto is because that's all they hear about. Like I asked them, like, do you all of your crypto knowledge, does it come from mainstream media? And they say yes, of course. And they're like, okay, well, let me put it to you this way: how reliable is the mainstream media in general, like about any topic? And they're like, oh, and they kind of like laugh. And I'm like, exactly. So you shouldn't listen to the mainstream media about crypto, especially because crypto is inherently more complex than most things, because it's so technical. Like once you dive in deeper, right? So I explained that to them as well. And I'm not getting into my pitch yet, guys. Like I'm just trying to like give you like what I have loaded before I go into it, right? And then, as I said, like don't try to get them to buy anything. Don't make it sound like you're selling something to them. And this is why I said that unfortunately they've heard of Bitcoin before, is I don't talk about Bitcoin at all. I honestly don't think Bitcoin is a good flag bearer for this industry at all. I don't think that the Bitcoin community is a good flag bearer, especially the hardcore community. I think they turn a lot of people off. I think they put out really bad narratives out there for most people, and most people just simply aren't interested in Bitcoin. There's not much to it. Like, what am I supposed to say? I mean, I can explain the technicals of how Bitcoin works or how blockchain works, and I can kind of explain what the bull case is for Bitcoin, I guess, but I don't think that resonates with most people, and I don't think that would get my point across, so I don't do that. Anyway, now I'm going to, that's kind of like the ground rules. That's the kind of background stuff that I go into this with. Now I'm going to start my actual kind of like pitch that I give them. And you can time me from this. It usually takes around 10 minutes, but sometimes I lose track of time because, you guys know I talk really quickly and I like to talk a lot. So you can time me from starting now. So as I said, I start the discussion, kind of like asking them what they've kind of like heard of before. Obviously they've heard of Bitcoin and crypto before, and then I say, okay, well, I'm working within the Ethereum ecosystem, and then they're like, oh, okay, well, what's Ethereum? I'm like, okay, well, I have to say it's kind of like Bitcoin because that's just kind of like what they've heard before, but you can actually kind of like build stuff on it. Now, of course, this isn't going to mean much to most people. Build stuff on it. What does that mean? So I have to use analogies from there. So I always give the analogy of the internet. I say to them, okay, well, you know how there's like the internet and there's all these websites and applications that interact with the internet that are built on top of it. I mean, we all use them. We all have smartphones, all that good stuff there. And obviously, immediately they get that. Like, I don't have to explain any further from there. And then I say to them, well, with Ethereum, there are applications just like there are on the internet, but they're different sorts of applications. And then I go into kind of like some of the like applications that are built on Ethereum that people would immediately resonate with. So I basically say to them, think of a bank. Think of the functions that a bank does. Okay, the bank is going to loan you money, or a bank is going to store your money, or a bank is going to give you a yield on your money, right? It's obviously not a great yield these days, but they're going to give you a yield. Then I say to them, well, on Ethereum, there are actually financial applications that allow you to do this, but what they allow you to do is that, and I don't mention decentralization here because that doesn't really mean anything to anyone, but I say to them, like, they allow you to do it kind of like having a custody of your own funds. So you can go on your computer just like you do normally, or your kind of like phone or your laptop, whatever it is. You can have a wallet, so like a digital wallet. I think when I say digital wallet instead of like a private public key pair, obviously people are going to resonate with that because they know what a wallet is. I say to them, you have money in there, and then you go to these websites, you go to these apps, and you interact with them. You say, okay, well, I want to deposit my money here. I want to earn such and such yield, and then it just all happens for you automatically. And then I kind of explain some other things like Uniswap, for example. I say to them like, okay, have you ever traded stocks before? And some of them have, some of them haven't. And then I say to them, well, okay, you can do the same thing on a centralized crypto exchange, of course, but you can also do it on top of Ethereum. There's this thing called Uniswap. I always give that as an example. I say to them, you can swap assets for assets. So I say to them, if you have, and then this is where I started explaining stable coins. I say to them, okay, well, there's these coins that exist that are actually stable to a US dollar. So there's this coin called USDC. I start with the centralized ones first, and I say it is pegged to US dollars, right? So if you have one USDC, you can redeem that for $1 US. And then I go on to say, okay, well, then you can trade that USDC for an asset like ETH through Uniswap. And it's the same thing as going to this website, going to an app, and just kind of like clicking through and clicking the relevant buttons, and you do this all from your own wallet. There's no middlemen. There's no need for you to deal with bankers. No need for you to kind of like go into a bank. There's no need for you to kind of like sign up for an account or anything like that. Your wallet is your account. And the wheels start turning from here, guys. Like, they really do start resonating with it. Like, and then I'll get comments like, oh, I had no idea this existed. Like, why don't I ever hear about this? And they legitimately say that because think of what you are like when you're kind of like outside of the ecosystem and not paying any attention to crypto. All the narratives come and everything you hear about comes from mainstream media, and they barely ever cover any of this sorts of stuff. So obviously, why would someone know about it? If they're not in the industry, they're obviously not going to know about it. So I start getting some really positive comments about it, and I'm like, okay. And then I say to them, like, well, this is why I'm really excited about Ethereum, because these are the most basic applications, or at least the ones that I'm able to kind of like translate really easily for you, but there are so many more applications. And I kind of like continue explaining to them, like, there's money markets where you can kind of like take loans, borrow money. I don't explain the over collateralization part because I think that just goes too deep. I try to keep it high level because if these people are really new to crypto, they're obviously not going to understand anything deeper than the highest level stuff, at least to begin with. So I keep it high level, and I say, there's money markets. You can kind of like borrow from that. You can put your money in, and you can earn a yield. And I kind of like explain all that as well from there too. And then, if they seem really interested, I start going even deeper from there. And I kind of like say things like, okay, well, there's not just financial applications, there's actually applications like social media, but decentralized. And that's where I start getting into the decentralization of it all. I say, okay, well, there's the Ethereum network is actually not controlled by any one person. There's no CEO, there's no dictator, there's no president, there's nothing. The Ethereum network is run by computers all over the world. And I think that's pretty simple for most people to understand. They don't have to understand how networking works or how blockchain works, but they understand that people can have software on their computers and run it from anywhere on the planet because the internet's anywhere on the planet. So that's pretty straightforward. So I kind of like lean into that, and I basically say, And because of that, you can build whatever you want on there. And depending on how the application is structured, it can be built in such a way where no one can stop it. And I again go back to the Uniswap example and say Uniswap is actually built in a way where it can't be stopped. To stop it, you would have to take over the entire Ethereum network. And I don't go into too much detail about why that's actually very difficult to do, but I basically tell them, like, that's incredibly expensive to do. It costs billions and billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars. But I don't go into detail. I just give them like a number figure because they can immediately relate to that. So from then on, we kind of like continue the conversation a bit from there. I tell them about some more applications. As I said, decentralized social media. Then I move into NFTs, depending on where the conversation is going, because NFTs have an even worse image than crypto does generally. But, you know, I'll get weird looks when I mention NFTs, and I'll say to them, like, look, guys, like NFTs, the NFT is actually just kind of like a standard, right? And I try not to go too deep into it, like it's token standard and it stands for non-fungible token and all this sort of stuff. And I just say to them, okay, guys, like I bring it back to kind of real world examples again. I say to them, do you have trading cards that you collected as a kid? I mean, 9 times out of 10 they do, right? Especially if they're younger, they have trading cards that collected as a kid. I'm like, okay, well, a lot of these things are like that, right? But they're digital. And they say, oh, well, can't I just right-click save? I'm like, yeah, you can. Just like you can photocopy a Pokemon card. But the thing is that you can actually immediately prove whether it's genuine or not. And it's not so much about the actual image itself. It's about the authenticity of it. Like no one, I mean, there's a reason why fake trading cards and fake watches and fake everything else are essentially worth less than the original, even if they're really, really good replicas, is simply because of the fact that it's not the real thing. And yes, I know when you right-click save, you get the exact same image that you would get by buying it, but by buying the NFT, you're not just getting the image. I mean, the image is kind of like the last part of it that makes it valuable, I think. I think you get the provenance of it, right? You get the token in your wallet. You get the flex, essentially. People actually see that. I'm like, oh, holy shit, he actually has the real NFT. If it's worth a lot of money, they'll be like, oh my God, it's worth so much money. He must be kind of like a whale. It must be an OG, whatever it is, right? So there's a lot of that going on. And depending on where these people sit in terms of kind of like luxury items and things like that, and kind of like the money scale as well, they may or may not resonate with that. But as I said, I try to steer clear of NFTs, but I do kind of like throw it in there because I want to see where they're at with it. And then inevitably we'll get to the point where the conversation will probably turn to the monetary side of it, the investing side of it. And they're basically like, you know, aren't these things all kind of like monies and currencies? Like, I don't get how there can be like thousands of monies and currencies. And I immediately say, I'm like, no, okay, let me stop you there. Most of the assets in crypto have nothing to do with being a money or a currency. I would argue there's only a handful, not even, that are actually even trying to. I think there's 2 that are even trying to be money. It's Bitcoin and ETH, right? None of the other ones are trying to be money. Most of them don't even want to be money. And I explain to them, most of these projects that I mentioned to you, they have what's called a token associated with them. Now you can think of a token as a stock, right, in that company, or equity in that, protocol in that application. Now, whether the price of that kind of like token goes up or down depends on a variety of factors, and a lot of the time, the similar factors to what dictates a stock going up and down. And they immediately get that. That's like the cleanest analogy I can use. Even if it's not like totally accurate, it's the cleanest analogy I can use from there. And then they're like, oh my God, I had no idea about this, right? Like I had no idea. I thought everything was just trying to be a currency. I thought, these people were always talking about this currency replacing the Australian dollar where I am, or the US dollar. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, there's an element of that. And that's why I don't really talk about Bitcoin too much, because as I said, not many people resonate with this. But basically, I say to them, like, okay, yeah, that's basically Bitcoin's whole thing. That's its whole goal, its whole shtick. And they kind of like trended more towards the digital gold store value side than the currency side, at least right now. And I think in the future they have this theory that that'll come later, sort of thing. But I say to them, I'm like, okay, well, ETH is also trying to be a money and a currency, but I think with ETH it's more that it wants to be a currency of its own ecosystem. And then I kind of like start using some deeper analogies where I say you can imagine Ethereum as like a country, and ETH has its own Ethereum has its own currency called ETH, and Ethereum has its own businesses, which are the projects I mentioned. And then you keep going from there, and you keep going down that line of kind of like of thinking there. And honestly, like, I think all of that, especially for a new person, is interesting enough for them to kind of like kill their previous, or at least convincing enough for them to have like their previous narratives or their previous thoughts about crypto killed from there. I think so. At least most of them. And I think from then on, they have a more kind of like skeptical lens when looking at crypto on the mainstream media, and thinking, okay, well, what this is kind of like crap. This doesn't make any sense. Anthony told me this, and this is saying this. But in the vein of kind of like investing, once I finished explaining, to them how these things work, I then say to them, look, investing in general, not just within crypto, is incredibly hard. There are tons of scams. There are tons of projects that look better than what they are. There are tons of things that go down a lot. And I explain to them, like, plenty of these assets have gone down 90+% very easily in a few months. And it kind of like, and then I tell them, like, look, guys, like I kind of like do, ETH, I buy ETH and I do kind of like angel investing, but public markets, it's just very, very hard. And I say to them, like, a lot of the time it looks more like gambling than investing. And then I again say, like, that's the same thing with the stock market. Like, if you're day trading in the stock market, or if you're kind of like meme investing, which has kind of come to prominence over the last few years, to me, it's akin to gambling. And it's the same risk profile as well. Like, you could get a big return, but you could also lose a lot or all of your money, right? So, and that's kind of like where the conversation ends on the investing side, because I basically say, I don't give investment advice. Sorry, this is what I do. I basically buy ETH and I do angel investments. And then they might ask me, like, what's an angel investor? Like, how do I do that? And I'm like, well, okay. Well, and then I have to go into like another discussion, but that's orthogonal to the actual kind of like crypto pitch that I usually give. And that's kind of like how I do it, man. And then I usually finish off by kind of like saying that, if they're interested, they can go here, and here to learn more. And I link up to my channel, but I also say that my channel is for the more advanced kind of like crypto person. It's definitely not a beginner friendly thing. But yeah, that's kind of like where it goes. And the conversation can go in multiple directions from there, but that is generally the high level kind of like pitch that I give. Now, maybe that's not convincing to crypto veterans. Maybe that's not interesting to people who kind of like watch my show every day, because obviously we don't talk about that sort of stuff. We usually talk about the in the weeds stuff. But you'll notice that I didn't mention any of that. I didn't mention layer 2s. I didn't mention sharding. I only mentioned decentralization once in the context of what applications I was describing. I didn't mention EIP 1559. I didn't mention like deflationary ETH and none of that stuff, like monetary policy, because that stuff is not how you convince someone that is new to crypto. You can't just jump into the deep end for most people. Some people love jumping into the deep end, but most people do not, especially if they have these preconceived ideas and notions of what crypto can be. So that's kind of like where I ended. And I think that was around 10 minutes. I'm pretty sure. I see my timer here. I think that was about 10 minutes, which I even impressed myself there. Usually I can go on for a lot longer with people, as I'm sure Refuel listeners and watchers can imagine. But yeah, there's my promised kind of like pitch for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you resonated with it. I'm curious to hear if you guys have any other ideas of like what you've had success with explaining this kind of stuff to people. I mean, post it in the YouTube comments or in the Discord channel. I'd love to hear your ideas around how you pitch it to people and what you found to be most effective. Because I think, and I said this on the tweet here, I think most people are just uneducated. They're not actually quote unquote against crypto or just like have this inherent hate for crypto. They really just don't know any better. They're just uneducated. And I think the more time goes on, the more education that we put out there, it's going to be better overall and better long term. And we're going to we're going to come out better on the other side. So I have no doubt that that's going to happen, but we're going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep doing my education, obviously. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that pitch. I'm going to move on to the rest of the news for today. But yeah, there it is. All right, so we have an update on the Ropsten Merge. Imagine if I said that to the people that I give the pitch to. Ropsten Merge, right? Like, they would have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. Anyway, we've got an update about the Ropsten Merge here. So they've changed the TTD, or the terminal total difficulty, to 5. I don't know what that number is. There's a lot of zeros there. But basically, this is the TTD, right? And it's due to happen around June 8th, 9th. Just depends how fast we get there. So yeah, if you are running a kind of like a validator, or kind of like a nodes for Ropsten for that merge, definitely kind of like be aware of this. I think you need to manually set it in your own client, so be aware of that as well. But all of the information is in this blog post that Tim Byko posted, with all the links to download everything as well. So if you're interested in kind of like getting involved with this, you can. And there's kind of like, I guess, an updated graphic here from Trent Van Epps as well that he posted on Twitter around kind of like the timelines here. There are no, I guess, hard dates given or anything like that, but this is kind of like what we're looking at. And I explained this last week on the Refuel, so I won't rehash it here, but this is in a nice graphical format of the road to the merge from where we are today. So definitely you can check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description below, but just wanted to kind of give a heads up to you guys that we are 2 or 3 days away from the Ropsten merge. And as I said, this is the first public testnet to be merged. This will be a big test. This will kind of dictate, I think, a lot of the timelines for the merge. As I've said to you guys before, I think the merge is more likely to be September now rather than August because of the difficulty bomb delay. The difficulty bomb delay doesn't directly impact the merge, but it does add a bit more kind of like overhead in terms of coordination and stuff like that. So I expect it to add a bit more lead time there. But yeah, currently, nothing's changed. I think September. But if Ropsten doesn't go like we want it to go, if it doesn't go like not, as well as we want it to go, then we'll have to see. We'll have to revisit there. But yeah, that's my kind of like best guesstimate right now on that one. All right, so someone asked me to cover this. So Eric Wall put out a tweet just before where he said EIP 1559 took 2% of the supply off the market for good. It was a bigger event than MicroStrategy, which took 0.7% of BTC off the market, which is not really off the market because they may have to sell. They can sell in the future. And I've talked about this before, about how 1559 is more bullish than Sailor buying kind of like BTC here. And then Eric goes on to say, the reply guys that replied to his tweet are going to say Ethereum will like... And this is him saying to the reply guys, if someone kind of like replies to him and kind of like FUDs this. He says, Ethereum will likely reach 0% net issuance a full 100 plus years before Bitcoin. And when that happens, it also won't have to explore the uncertain security territory of trying to secure itself reliably using one of the least reliable budget sources in existence, transaction fees. Now, I've covered this before on the refill, but I will break it down quickly again for you guys here. So what Eric is saying here is that Ethereum will reach 0% net issuance or be deflationary because of the fact that issuance is much lower, post-merge, and we have the fee burn, which basically can make, ETH deflationary. Now, why he says a full 100 plus years before Bitcoin is because the last Bitcoin won't be mined until the year 2140. So there's still plenty of Bitcoin to be mined. Like, yes, it's halving and things like that, but, Bitcoin's not going to be 0% net issuance until it kind of like mints its last Bitcoin, or unless they implement a fee burn, or kind of like unless there's some way to quantify how much BTC is lost, over time, and if that rate, and if 1 year there's kind of like net issuance at 0% because of that. But yeah, that's kind of like that part. And then Eric says, when that happens, it also won't have to explore the uncertain security territory of trying to secure itself using transaction fees. Now, this part is about how Bitcoin has a hard cap. Obviously, there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin. So for its chain security, it needs to rely on transaction fees. And we all know that transaction fees on Bitcoin haven't been going up to make up for the loss in block rewards, which go down every 4 years because of the halvening, right? And because of that, Bitcoin's going to have a very real security crisis on its hands in maybe another 2 halvenings. I don't think it's going to take that long. 2 or 3 halvenings, unless the price of Bitcoin goes up a lot, it's going to have a real security crisis where its security kind of like... budget is going to be very, very low because I just don't see how the transaction fees are going to increase to match that. Whereas with Ethereum, it doesn't matter if transaction fees are high or low. The validators, post-merge are still going to be getting rewarded because Ethereum does not have a hard cap. The ETH issuance does not have a hard cap. ETH is issued to validators in order to make sure that they're paid for their work, even if they're not getting any kind of like fees. Because even if the fees are 0, it doesn't matter because these validators are still getting paid. So Ethereum does not rely on fee revenue for its security. But what fee revenue does for Ethereum with 1559 is that we burn most of it, and then we give a little bonus with the tip to the validators, right? So, and what that does is it basically offsets that issuance. So Ethereum actually has to earn its deflationary properties. It has to make sure its block space is valuable, its network is valuable enough for people to want to pay the fees, and then it needs to generate enough fees to make ETH net negative in issuance and to net out that issuance to 0% or below there. To me, that is the best monetary policy design in crypto, bar none. I believe in it so strongly. That's why I'm so bullish on ETH. I mean, this is the main reason why I'm bullish on ETH, and obviously everything else that falls off of that. But I think it is the best monetary policy ever. Like, I don't think anything is better than it right now. There may be something better than it in the future, but I think Ethereum currently has the best monetary policy in crypto, better than Bitcoin, leagues better than Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's monetary policy is reckless, extremely dangerous, and the fact that they're not even willing to talk about this and to admit that there is an issue here, at least most of them aren't, is very, very scary, I think, for Bitcoin's future. So hopefully I did a good job of explaining that that kind of like tweet from Eric here. But yeah, I'm going to leave it at that for now. A couple of other things to get through here. So speaking of the burns, speaking of EIP 1559, I kind of like went on the UltraSoundMoney website just before and kind of like came across the fact that L2's are now the top 5 or the number 4 in the burn categories leaderboard here. So you can see here that layer 2's on Ethereum have burned over 20,000 ETH, which is $38 million since EIP 1559 went live, which is obviously August of last year. And then I said, repeat after me, layer 2's are not parasitic to Ethereum or ETH. Now, I don't think I need to explain that to Refuel watchers and listeners. You guys know that layer 2's are not parasitic, but you can see here like unfakeable proof. Why I say it's unfakeable is because this is burned ETH. Right, this is not wash traded fees or anything like that, which is very, very hard to do. But this is on-chain verifiable burned ETH. There is $38 million worth of ETH at current prices, or over 20,000 ETH has been burned from layer 2 related activity. Now, this layer 2 related activity, I would assume, I don't think I can kind of like check how UltraSoundMoney is doing this, but I would assume it's got to do with kind of like all the bridge contracts in and out of layer 2, all the contracts that manage the kind of like state of the L2 and kind of like post their batches and things like that, and any other kind of like L2 related stuff across all of them, right? Whether it's the kind of like big ones or the small ones, this is kind of like what they've burned so far. And this is obviously going to keep going up and increasing at a rapid pace as layer 2s continue their adoption. I explained last week that Optimism's kind of like token launch meant that layer 2s peaked at like I think 3.8% of layer 1 block space usage for the day, and that was a record. But usually it hovers around 1-ish%, I think. And that's reflected in the burn, but we expect that to go up over time. So I just wanted to kind of like highlight that for you guys. But also the UltraSoundMoney account kind of like posted that OpenSea has burned on its own over $1 billion worth of ETH, which is what I think $1 million, probably more than 894,000. Yeah, more. Yeah. So including all of OpenSea's contracts, you can see here that if I'm doing my math correctly, it's over $1 million. That's $1 billion. Sorry, I was counting that in ETH. Sorry, it's $1 billion worth of ETH, which I guess you can see here. This is the whole NFT category. They've burned 894,000 ETH, the entire NFT category. OpenSea would obviously take up a large chunk of that. So NFTs have been a blessing for Ethereum layer 1, right? Like there's been so much ETH burned because of that activity. It's just been crazy. And I don't think anyone saw that coming. So cool to see that, and cool to see UltraSoundMoney post this to remind us about it. All right, so I put out another tweet today where I said, games like Diablo or Mortal are the exact reason why gamers automatically hate NFTs. They simply see NFTs as an extension of the horrible financialization trend that has dominated gaming over the last decade, such as loot boxes and pay to win in general. And to be honest, I don't blame them. Now, for those of you who don't know, Diablo Immortal is a game that came out recently, has a bunch of microtransactions in it, but they're not just microtransactions for aesthetic stuff. It's a pay to win game, essentially. So I think to be the strongest character in the game, or to kind of like to boost your character to the strongest point, you can pay $100,000 to do that. To get it to that state normally would take a very, very long time of gameplay. I don't know the exact numbers, but it would take a very long time. Now, Diablo Immortal is not the first to do this. They're pretty much, they're not the last, but they're very late to the game here. Mobile gaming is basically dominated by shitty apps that are literally gated by money. Like they're actually built by psychologists to reel you in. There's a lot of these world building or city building apps. They'll reel you in and then they'll gate you. And they'll basically be like, okay, well, if you want to go faster, if you want to build your base faster, you have to buy such and such resource with real dollars, right? And these games make a shit ton of money. So much money. Like more money than like billions and billions of dollars, right? They're extremely lucrative. But what that has done is that for gamers, like actual gamers who enjoy video games and have enjoyed video games for a very long time, they really hate this financialization of video games. And because of that, they automatically hate NFTs, because obviously NFTs are closely tied to video games, and all they see NFTs as is another arm of this hyper-financialization of an entertainment medium that they used to really, really love, but now don't get as much value out of because so much stuff has microtransactions or in-app purchases or monetization attached to it. And as I said, I don't blame them one bit. We need to do a better kind of like job within the industry of explaining why NFTs within video games are actually a good idea, why they add value, why they can be complementary. But I don't think we've been able to do that at this stage. I think the most popular games, the NFT kind of like dominated games in crypto right now, the ones that have gotten the most usage, Axie Infinity, for example. Look, guys, like I don't think Axie Infinity was made to be a Ponzi, but like it pretty much looks like a Ponzi. I mean, like you can see what happened. A lot of money came in, right? It had like a flywheel effect. Then the money stopped coming in, and it did the opposite. I don't think it's a Ponzi, but it has a lot of kind of like Ponzi-like attributes to it. And from a lot of people that I've spoken to, the game wasn't actually even fun. It was more that they were just kind of like farming the money out of it. Same with things like Steppen. Like I don't even know if I'd consider Steppen a video game. but it's kind of like a gamified fitness app, right? It's the same kind of like principle there. So those are the extreme examples, but at this point in time, there hasn't been that many examples of video games that I've seen that have actually been enhanced by NFTs. And we have to do a better job of that if we want these people to come on board with it. So I just wanted to kind of like point that out as my opinion on that. But as usual, please, if you have your own opinion, come into the Discord channel, discuss it with me. Better in there than YouTube comments, guys. Like YouTube comments, I don't like replying there because the threads just get all mixed up and it's just like a shitty medium to reply on. Discord channel, you can join it in the YouTube description. Definitely go there. If you have opinions on anything that I ever talk about, I'd love to hear from you on that one. All right, so I spoke last week about Nate from OpenSea and about how the Department of Justice has kind of like gone after him about insider trading. And I got a little bit of pushback on it. People were like, why do you feel sorry for Nate in some respect? Because I kind of like feel sorry for him because he's being made an example of. But it's not so much that I thought, it's not that I thought what he did was right. Obviously, it's not. I think what he did was completely wrong. He should be punished for it. But my problem is that the bigger scammers, the bigger insider traders, the bigger people who kind of like, the bigger grifters, way bigger, get away with it all. And ZackXBT is the number one kind of like person that calls this out on Twitter. I highly recommend following him, by the way. But this is a thread where he put together a bunch of very, very public figures. You may have heard of some of them, you may have not, such as Floyd Mayweather, Jake Paul, Soulja Boy, Lindsay Lohan, Jay Alvarez, Lil Yachty, and Logan Paul, right? 7 influencers here that are huge, not just influencers, just like extremely famous people. I'm sure most of you have heard of these people, at least 1 or 2 of them, right? He put together a thread here of how these people, especially during the bull market, promoted NFTs, did NFT rugs and scams. Most of it was NFTs, did token kind of like scams, token rugs, and they got away with all of it. As far as I know, most of them, if not all of them, have not been punished at all for this at this point in time. At all, right? And these things were much, much greater than what Nate did. Nate did, I think, a few tens of thousands of dollars worth of insider trading. And he got fired for it. He's pretty much unhireable. His career's over, and now the Department of Justice is going after him. Whereas these already rich people, these already rich celebrities are here rugging millions and millions and millions of dollars from their kind of like all retail, right? From their followers, which are basically all non-crypto people. And they're doing it over and over again with NFTs, with tokens, not disclosing it at all, right? Literal scams and rugs. And they haven't seen any punishment. This was my point that I was bringing up last week. If these people get no punishment at all, and all that gets punished is the small fish, then what the fuck is the point? Like, seriously, what is the point? Like, a deterrent? Maybe, right? Do you think people like this are going to be deterred just because Nate got, the Department of Justice went after Nate? Probably not, because they know that they're rich enough to hire good lawyers and defend themselves and just settle for probably less than what they made from these sorts of things, right? Whereas people, the smaller people, right? Apparently Nate has a good legal team, but like I'm not just trying to focus on him. Just in general, usually have to just take a plea deal because they can't afford to fight these sorts of stuff. And in the plea deal, usually is more money than what they have because they didn't really make much money from it to begin with. I'm not saying they shouldn't be punished, right? Not at all. They should be punished, but I know the law and justice doesn't work like this, but come the fuck on. Super public personalities on kind of like Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, super, famous people are getting away with this. And in all honesty, most of them, if not all of them, are never going to get punished for this. That's what makes me angry. It's what makes me so disappointed and so sad and just being like, what the fuck? Like, why does it have to be this way, right? I'm so thankful for people like Zach who at least highlights this and puts together threads and puts himself on the line for this. Like, yes, he's anonymous, but I think he's been doxxed before and things like that. I don't know the full story there, but he puts himself on the line for this and actually calls out this stuff. And this is another reason... This is one reason that I didn't kind of like bring up as to why I don't call out more of this stuff kind of like directly within the industry. It's because I'm a doxed person. I don't want to put a target on my back, right? Like, I'm not someone who kind of like wants to be like, calling out all these people directly and then them kind of like coming after me in some such way, whether that be physically or digitally. I don't really want that. That's why we need people like Zach who are kind of like anonymous, or other people like him to call out this sorts of stuff directly. But also, I don't have time to keep up with all the scams either. Like, and it's just depressing, to be honest, to see all this sorts of stuff. But I guess my main point is that, like, I really, really hope that the regulators, the law enforcement goes after at least some of these people. Because if they don't, this stuff's just going to keep happening again and again and again. No one's going to be scared by the kind of like deterrent that they're doing with kind of like Nate, or the example that they're making with Nate, except the smaller kind of like players. And okay, fair enough, that does something. But the bigger players, the bigger scammers, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing, right? So yeah, I'm ranting now, but like I feel strongly about this, and I just wanted to kind of like correct or at least kind of clarify what I meant last week by what I said. All right, finally here, I just wanted to highlight that I joined the StakeBorgDAO here, kind of like on a, I guess like interview here on a podcast. Definitely go check it out if you haven't yet. We talked about obviously all things Ethereum, all things crypto. It was quite a fun discussion here. I really liked kind of like talking about basically more, I guess like there was Ethereum and crypto talk, but there was kind of like more talk about like DAOs and stuff like that I don't talk about that often. So yeah, it was a really, really cool discussion. I'm not going to kind of like spoil it for you guys. You should definitely check it out. It's in the second tweet here. So I'll link this in the YouTube description and you can go check it out. But I think that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.